Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Massaro Method. I am so excited today to welcome Operator Starsky. Starsky is a big blogger, has a huge YouTube channel, but most importantly, he is a Ukrainian National Guardsman, a member of the Ukrainian National Guard. He has been putting up content, videos, interviews, all sorts of commentary since the beginning of Russia's genocidal invasion, and he's been an absolutely critical member of the community informing the outside world about the crimes of Russia, but also the valor and bravery that we have seen from Ukrainians and also some of the international elements that have come to support Ukraine. So, Starsky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for being invited.
So as always, before we begin, please share, like, comment, subscribe, get these voices heard, and keep the channel growing. So Starsky, if we could just start sort of very simply with some simple background for those that do not know, for the audience, what is the Ukrainian National Guard and who are you?
Ukrainian National Guard is a military force that is attached to the Ministry of Interior, unlike our army that is that belongs to the Ministry of Defense. But currently, because there's war, we work together with the Ministry of Defense, performing same tasks because there are multiple mechanized brigades in the National Guard that basically have the same tasks as other army units. And my brigade is one of those. It's called the Rapid Response Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine. It's also called the Frontier. And I'm a press officer in this brigade.
Okay, rapid response in that you guys are popping in when Russians show up, or are you, I mean, what are you responding to rapidly?
Basically, our mission is to meet the enemy.
Yes.
And stop any advance or offensive in that area and wait until the heavy cavalry arrives, meaning our army and our paratroopers or whoever it is.
Yeah, I see. Okay, so I've got a few questions for you based on some of your videos and some of the work you've done that I found interesting. But let me first sort of ask, I mean, we're a year into this invasion now, and obviously, I mean, Ukraine has already pulled off what many considered impossible, and I mean, continues to pull off every day what many consider impossible. What is the feeling at the moment? I know we are all sort of in this place of expecting or fearing or maybe even seeing in some part heightened Russian aggression. Russia is continuing to push these Mobics sort of into the meat grinder. So, I mean, how are people holding up?
I will talk on behalf of military people, okay?
Yes.
Because I am one, and I can say that we are pretty much tired because we were much more confident last year. Last year we saw that Russian army can be stopped, it can be destroyed, their personnel can be eliminated in huge numbers, and basically as of today we have completely eliminated the amount of Russian troops that were used to invade Ukraine in the beginning of the year. So they lost 130,000 men, and approximately 3 times as much were wounded. At the same time, they decided to mobilize more men, and now we have approximately 500,000 Russians on the uncontrolled territory, on the occupied territory. But at the same time, we know that this is just another challenge because we know that we can eliminate them efficiently, and basically in a year they managed to lose all the territories that they captured, except for some territories in the area of Mariupol. It's a Donetsk region. And some minor territories, and they only managed to capture 10-20 kilometers in the area of Bakhmut, north of Bakhmut, which means that the speed of their advance is ridiculous. And currently they don't have enough personnel to perform attacks in multiple directions. So we know that this is just another challenge, and if we have to eliminate 500,000 Russians, we will do that because our existence depends on this.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, they're able to grind it to a stalemate essentially for a while, given that they can throw all these untrained individuals in there who are then mowed down. But I can understand how that is both physically and psychologically tedious and exhausting to have to face these individuals down. What can we in the United States, obviously, but also in sort of the G7 and in the democratic world, the democratic allies that have been supporting, do better and know in order to not only get you the weapons you need, but also to help increase morale and to demonstrate that we're, with you in this?
I can tell you definitely that, any sort of presence of our foreign allies and friends is a big psychological help to Ukrainians, because, it's dangerous to come to Ukraine right now. Every city, even cities on the west of Ukraine, far away from the front line, they are still subject to cruise missile attacks. So it's unsafe. But at the same time, even hearing foreign language on the streets of Ukraine and things like that, it's a huge motivational factor for us. As for the military aid, I think that if foreign politicians and foreign rulers really want to save Ukraine, other than just show all the destruction and Russian committed atrocities and things like that, if saving Ukraine is their actual goal, right? My opinion, they have to multiply the amount of delivered vehicles by 10, because one way or another, Russians still have around 6,000 tanks, let alone their armored vehicles. They had 10,000 tanks in the beginning of this invasion, but we managed to improve 3,000 Russian tanks and capture a bit more. But they still have 6,000 tanks that can be brought to Ukraine. And we're talking about 10, 20, 30 tanks that will be sent to Ukraine, which is discussed in different countries. What makes me, let's say, not furious, but a bit disappointed is that during those Budapest, that Budapest event, right, that took place in 1994, Ukraine gave up 1,700 nuclear warheads.
Yeah.
How many tanks can you exchange for 1,700 nuclear warheads? And people still discussing, like, do we send 14 or 15 tanks to Ukraine? It's ridiculous.
No, I mean, you'll find no argument from me. That's entirely my view as well. I mean, we're not even in the right ballpark. Although, I mean, again, it's no consolation, but I do believe that we will get there. I mean, we've already gone from 20 to 178 from Germany, I mean, and it's going to go higher than that, yeah. I mean, it's so, we're constantly talking ourselves in circles, and we need to convince one another, and the political work in this is so tedious. I mean, it's frustrating and it doesn't make any sense, but I think we are going to arrive where we need to be. The concern, of course, is what is taking so long, and every day of delay is more Ukrainian lives, so we really need to be moving more quickly. So tell us about these. You've mentioned, hearing foreign languages, and you've done videos on, the international elements that are both fighting in Ukraine and sort of based in Ukraine. Can you tell us a little bit about the the foreigners you've met in Ukraine, those that are fighting, but also maybe those that are delivering goods and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what are your, I guess, what is struck? You know, what has struck you about these individuals?
I can say that I met all kinds of people here, starting from warriors that actually fight for Ukraine, and not only warriors from the West. There are also Russian people fighting for Ukraine in the Russian battalion called Freedom for Russia. And those are basically decent Russians. That's how I can call them. And there are different people from Europe as well as America, Asian countries. Countries that actually surprised me, because there are also volunteers from Iran, Myanmar, and countries like that. At the same time, I met a lot of people who do other important things like demining. There were some great guys from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the UK, Ireland, people that do demining here in my area and other areas. There were civilian volunteers bringing different stuff, like vehicles for Ukrainian soldiers, like providing civilians with psychological relief. And there were also medics that my buddy Brandon, that is now working in the area of Bakhmut. He's a former military, but he has this huge experience in combat medicine, and he saves lives. So basically, we have all kinds of support, from military to I don't know, medical support and things like that.
Yeah, and these are all volunteers, right? I mean, these are individuals who have come of their own volition and own accord to volunteer on the Ukrainian side.
Yeah, exactly. And also there's a lot of just civilian people living in Ukraine. My buddy Johnny FD, who lives in Kiev, who received residentship of Ukraine, as well as other people, journalists that risk their life a lot on the front lines, and they also do great job, in my opinion.
No, that's terrific, and that's I mean, it's a real inspiration. I mean, those people are direct action, not in this endless circular debate that we're all in the political world, but in fact just getting in there and taking action, and that's a really wonderful thing. And they are incorporated. The warriors and medics are incorporated under the Ministry of Defense. They are the International Legion, or how is that laid out?
Not only International Legion, because in the Armed Forces of Ukraine you can join any unit that you want. Yes, because
you'll be with Ukrainians.
Yes, like for foreigners, because there is different. Foreign Legion is a separate unit. Let's call it this way. It's a separate force. Basically, you can apply for any Ukrainian unit as a foreigner, and you will be accepted, and you can fight. We had that in the Armed Forces of Ukraine since 2015. Didn't have a lot of volunteers, not as much as today, of course, but there were still people that served in the Armed Forces of Ukraine officially. They are officially employed. It's not like mercenaries or convicts brought by Russians. They have official employment, salary, and eventually they receive residency in Ukraine as well.
Yeah, I saw today that Wagner fella that held up the skull is no longer among the living. So
it's karma. Karma.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice story of karma. So now he can, justify that to the Almighty. Yeah. So I wanted to actually, on the topic of Russians, I know that you've also had the opportunity to communicate with some of the Russians. And I guess I mean, what are your impressions? I mean, who are these people that are stealing washing machines and getting tossed into this conflict to be in this meat grinder? And I mean, give us some idea of your conversations.
Basically, it's like people who were brainwashed for decades, and they were convinced that they are God's chosen nation. Everybody else is stupid and weak, and Russians are so great because they have they were chosen by God. They have this Russian Orthodox Church. They have this spiritual connection with nature, cosmos, Mars, and gods and whatever. And worst thing was that during those decades of brainwashing, they were brainwashed into hating everybody. So they hate all the West, of course, but specifically they hate Ukraine because they were invading Ukraine over and over again for almost 1,000 years, and they never managed to connect Ukraine, to attach it completely to the territory of Russia, because we always managed to become independent one way or another. And that's why they hate us so much. And basically this invasion, all this war, is based on hatred towards Ukrainians.
Yeah. I mean, that's been the takeaway of a lot of, I mean, I think for the West, for those of us that have worked in this space for a long time even, and then for those experts that have, I guess, studied Russia, I mean, this has come as something of a surprise. I mean, it's been kind of a symptom of not listening to Ukrainians and not listening to Poles and sort of buying the Russian narrative for a very long time, that we missed this kind of deep level of imperial resentment, essentially, that these individuals are coming in with. I mean, that's how you get these kind of people in the West that still insist this is a product of NATO, a NATO expansion or whatever. When in fact, I think that's exactly right. I think those takeaways. I mean, this is about domination of Ukraine, as it's been about for hundreds of years. I mean, and is this the last time? I mean, is this the time where Ukraine can finally sort of win permanently? And will this be the last Russian invasion of Ukraine after like over so many years?
It will be the last invasion of Russia into Ukraine as soon as Ukraine is accepted into NATO or given some kind of solid security guarantees. Because those guarantees that were given during Budapest Memorandum and other events, they don't work, obviously. We have anything but security here. Again, there's a lot of people claiming and trying to justify, this invasion by saying that NATO was gonna expand, and Russia was opposing this. Russia never opposed the expansion of NATO, in history. Gorbachev directly said that during the collapse of the Soviet Union, nobody talked about it, and nobody from the Russian side were concerned about NATO expansion. They didn't even talk about it completely. Then Ukraine, yet in 2008, if not 2010, Ukraine still, according to its doctrine, considered West and NATO as potential enemies. We didn't plan to join NATO. And we only started talking about joining NATO when we realized that Russia was a real threat, probably around 2015, 2016. And it was already 2 years after our territories were annexed by Russia.
Yeah.
We're talking about Crimea, and we're talking about Donbass regions that were occupied. Only after 2 years, probably since those events, we started thinking probably we should join NATO because, like, you know, those guys are crazy. So that's another thing. Ukraine was never part of NATO, but now we're seriously considering joining, of course, because Russians forced us to do so.
Well, I mean, in my view, NATO would be lucky to have you. I think that Ukraine has shown it is, you know, as far as combat goes, perhaps the most effective military fighting force on the European continent, and one of the most ready. You know, I mean, I think that it would be a great addition to NATO. I think it would help me sleep more soundly at night, knowing we have the Ukrainians at our back, and it's something I think we would really like to see. I think, though, that the reality, I mean, again, I hate talking about the reality because you can always change political realities. Political realities are never in stone. I mean, Jesus, before this full-scale invasion, the political reality was Germany was doing Nord Stream 2, you know? I mean, so political realities change all the time, so it's a bad way to talk about that. But I think it's going to be difficult to get NATO member states to agree to admit Ukraine until Ukrainian victory, because there will be this kind of assumption that this would mean, you know, joining the war. So when in your view, what will it take to achieve Ukrainian victory? And that is to say, I mean, if you have a different idea of victory, I'm also interested. Our idea of victory, at least looking at it from the outside, has been a return to 1991 borders, a complete reclamation of stolen Ukrainian territory, a complete liberation of Ukraine.
Absolutely. We can even return to the borders of 2003, because that's exactly the year when Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Kuchma signed a resolution recognizing each other's borders. So he officially signed the paper that recognized borders of modern Ukraine, which are basically the same as in 1991. So I agree on that. One of our goals is to return those borders of 1991. We want to push out those invaders out of Ukraine. We want to return people who were kidnapped. And of course, we want to bring criminals to justice, because they need to face justice for all the crimes they committed. I think they can keep toilets.
And maybe a washing machine or two.
Washing machine, I don't know. Like it's more like more sophisticated stuff.
It's more personal, yeah.
Yeah, but toilets they can keep. Okay, we can buy new ones. We have enough money for that. But as for the rest, those are the goals, basically. Because if Russia goes unpunished away from this conflict, this horrible invasion, then it will be a sign for other maniacs that basically they can do the same. And there's a lot of maniacs.
Well, I just wanted to say, I mean, I actually just had given the Syrian earthquake and all that, revisited with my Syrian friends who point that out immediately and say that the West's lack of response when it came to Russia's bombing of Syrian civilians and this kind of overstepping red lines without response basically gave the green light for the initial invasion of Ukraine. I mean, I agree with that. I think you're exactly right. If Ukraine isn't returned to 1991 borders, we should be anticipating further invasions of, democratic states by tyrants, whether it's China and Taiwan or whether it's Putin in some NATO state or Moldova or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree on that. Syria it's a good lesson for all of us. Again, we are so grateful to Syrian people because, you know, when this invasion started, they started sharing their experience with us. And first thing they told us was, you should keep your shelters for civilians, specifically for kids, in secret from Russians. Because if you start writing those huge letters on houses and whatever that don't bomb, kids are here, they will specifically bomb those areas, and that's exactly what they do.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, they see it as a bonus. They see it as a good thing because that's their goal is terror. Their goal is their idea. They're a terrorist state. I mean, in the most simple way, they're trying to terrorize the Ukrainian population like they tried to terrorize the Syrian population. So you're exactly right. So what is it going to take, in your view? I mean, what is the operation? What is the battle that leads to winning the war?
The main battle, of course, will be fought in the heads of Russian citizens, in my opinion, because unless they realize that they will not survive being completely isolated from the civilized world and having a tyrant ruling them and things like that, nothing will change. There will be wars like this one in the future. But they need to change themselves. Again, because they were brainwashed for a century, it will take a while. It's not gonna happen like tomorrow. But when it happens, and when they change their mind completely, and when they become democratic, when they start respecting other countries, when they start respecting freedom of speech, you know, all the rights of their own people, I think eventually there will be no need to have NATO at all in the future, in the distant future.
In a very, very distant future.
Yeah, but speaking about the goals that we have now is basically eliminate Russian personnel as much as we can, deliver a lot of black bags to every Russian house, and we can do that as far as we can. We have a lot of weapons. We will be doing that because if we are conquered, if Ukrainian state disappears, we will all be killed, and we are fighting for our survival. Russians don't. They're not aimed at, you know, attaching Ukraine to Russian territory and things like that. They aimed at elimination of Ukrainians, of Ukrainian nation. Yeah. And that will be the beginning of elimination of European nations, and then all the Western democracy and Western civilization.
I mean, you're exactly right. That's that's been my read since the very beginning. That's why I always come back to the notion that Ukraine is defending the free world. It is defending all democracy and honestly all humanity, because you're exactly right. This is not Russia will not stop with Ukraine and never intended to. Never intended to.
Yeah, so Starsky, we joked that Ukraine is like a combat wing of the European Union.
Yes, I mean it's the shield, right? I mean that's what it is now. I see there's a lot of those drawings out there of Ukraine being the shield, and it is. You know, and I mean I wish we'd recognize, and I mean we try to fight over here to help those who have a little bit of trouble recognizing to recognize that this involves us all, that Ukraine is defending us all, that Ukraine is fighting for us all, and we better get our heads screwed on straight and support Ukraine properly, because, I mean, it's amazing the extent to which Ukraine gave us this second chance at life. I mean, if Ukraine hadn't fought, if Ukraine had fallen, we would be in a really serious World War III style situation right now, because Russia would have had some kind of incursion into NATO. She would have had some kind of incursion into Taiwan, and we would be in this kind of tyrants versus democracies world war. But instead, Ukrainians fought, sort of prevented that, basically took the entire burden onto their shoulders, and now we have to support them properly. And sadly, I think so far we've kind of done the bare minimum. I hope we get past the bare minimum, but that's kind of the way I've felt. So
we need that. We really need that.
Starsky, thanks so much for joining today. It's great talking to you. Let's be in touch.
Thank you so much, buddy.
Bye-bye.